It's an ever expanding sense of self depending on the tantrum or depending on the experience. Would you say you get closer to that conscious self as you realize more and more what experiences it's able to contain? Because the ego self can't contain these experiences. Like, that's the threat to the ego self, is when you have an experience that you have no container for and you have to find a new container.
If you're oriented from ego to the extent that there's lack of container, then you feel out of control. You feel scared, you feel anxious, and or you just orient narcissistically. Because if there's no container, it just gets infinitely big. And so then everything is within that perspective that you have.
Right.
So it maximizes on the universe. Again, it's like, that's all fine if you can just be narcissistic enough. Developmentally, it starts in the narcissistic. And so it is just maximized on the universe, just projected out. When there's not awareness of that or beyond that, meaning that to the extent that you believe it, then you're fine.
Right.
Developmentally, when there's a dawning of awareness that, wait a second, there is a larger world out there beyond this field that I'm putting out, then you're confronted with anxiety, fear, insecurity, etc. In the individuation process for the child, there's the narcissistic state where the child's fine. The child seems more secure than a little bit later when the child's a little older, because there's been a dawning of the awareness of separateness. Now suddenly the child's super clingy or needing more support than they did previously. And so we all have that, where a defense we can do is, in the face of conflict or lack of containment, lack of mirroring, we'll just amp up our narcissistic stance. And it's like, well, why do that? Because to come back down out of that narcissistic stance where you're insisting on maximizing your view, not wanting to allow any room for doubt or disagreement. So, for example, if someone points a gun at you and seems like they're going to shoot, you're going to do the same thing energetically that the narcissistic stance is. If it's you coming into my apartment, but I think it's some intruder, and then you see, oh my God, he's got a gun and he thinks I'm an intruder, you're going to suddenly try to get my attention and control what I do as fast and as intensely as you can.
Right.
So you're not gonna do a relational dynamic that like lets me have my view and my perspective. You're gonna immediately try to take over the situation and say, "Don't shoot." And so that would be appropriate, right?
Right.
If you went into that same state, and it doesn't have to be super intense, right? But that thing where if you maximize, and then we're just talking about where we might want to go have lunch. It's like, all right, now you're being controlling, or now you're being narcissistic ass.
Right.
So we should be able to go in and out of these states.
So you're a kid and you just start out narcissistic, like you're saying. And then gradually you realize that the field that you have has its limits, and you begin individuating. And there's kind of a fear response to that, like you're saying, you start clinging to something else. So that's kind of the pattern. And then you kind of have to recover and become an individual on your own. And then there's still like that tension between like expanding and contracting and clinging to something else, anchoring in something else. I feel like it's hard to initially see the cycle you're going through as the same one you did when you were a kid. The difficulty of acknowledging that can be a barrier to like seeing it more consciously and trying to think of a different way to explain it that involves levels of understanding. Or is it just via consciousness seeing that this is the pattern that continues throughout life?
If I'm hearing your question right, the answer is the dimension approach.
Nice.
But it is, right? The idea is the conscious mind can see this.
Right.
The conscious mind can see, oh, I'm in a narcissistic stance. The ego mind doesn't really know you can maximize windows or minimize windows or change windows and all that, right?
Right.
It's the conscious mind sees that. The conscious mind's aware that, okay, well, this is what's on the screen right now, but that's because this is maximized.
Yeah.
That idea of being conscious, it's the conscious mind that has the ability to see this stuff.
And then that's outside of time or levels
Right.
of experience.
Right.
And that kind of feels like jumping to the conclusion, I guess. And so I'm trying to see if there's like a way of teaching it or saying it that shows like this gradual arising of that understanding.
My understanding of the narcissistic mode, you're in a narcissistic mode when you are maximizing your perspective onto a given environment. And so the view from there is taken as a given, or that's the origin. You're not questioning where you're looking from. Mm-hmm. You're just unconsciously looking from there, maximizing your view onto the environment. And so then if something in the environment conflicts with your perspective, then your view is, well, then it's just wrong. In the same way that if I have sunglasses on, or they're rose-colored, or they're yellow-tinted or something, but I'm just assuming, like, I'm not aware of that, right? I'm just taking it to be that, no, I'm seeing truth. I'm going to be saying that everything's a certain color.
Right.
And then if you're saying, no, I don't think that's the color that you're saying it is, it's like, well, you're obviously wrong, because I can see very clearly that.
Right.
And it's really, I'm looking through my yellow-tinted sunglasses, and I'm saying, no, it's clearly got a yellow hue to it, Jeff. Like, I don't know what your deal is, but...
I mean, I can see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's plain as day. I'm looking at it. It's yellow.
Yeah.
And so if you put it into a more energetic 3D model, we put out this field from our mind that's of a certain vibe, a certain perspective. To use the sunglasses thing, there's a certain tint to it. And we all make the mistake of thinking we're just looking through absolutely clear, pure glasses at reality. And we're not. The ego mind is incapable of that. It's the diamond mind. It's the conscious mind, right? They call it the diamond mind. In Buddhism, Almas calls it the diamond mind. Part of the reason they call it the diamond is because this idea of clarity. When you're looking with the diamond mind, you see with absolute clarity. The ego mind does not. The reason Almas calls the personal essence point the pearl is because even though the personal essence point is essence, there's opaqueness to it now, because it's your individual essence point. Whereas the diamond mind is more an objective lens. It just sees the truth, not personal truth. It just sees truth. The energy point in the abdomen that is the personal realization point, again, he calls it the pearl. It's still essential. It's still beautiful. It's still a jewel, but it's opaque now.
Huh. And then it gets, like, just from other terms for that, it's like unique self.
Barbara Brennan calls it the core star. So in the same way that we confuse the ego mind for the conscious mind, in the upper abdomen, we confuse the third chakra for the personal essence point.
Oh, okay. So
that narcissistic state is letting your energy expand out.
Well, it's like unconsciously. It's just like you said, it sits there. That's just the state it's in. So it's not like you're going, I'm going to expand my field right now. You've already expanded it to the point that you think everything around you is you,
right?
And your understanding of it is absolute.
Yes,
but you don't think of it that way,
right? Yeah, if it's actual narcissism, you're not aware of it,
right?
Any energy center can be in a narcissistic state, can be in that expanded, maximized on the universe. So your first chakra can be maximized on the universe, which is different than is your intellect doing that.
What are some of the differences there?
Like, your mind can be in a state where it's like, no, of course my first chakra isn't in charge of the universe.
You can conceptually know that, but then energetically be doing it.
Right. And that creates a lot of confusion and conflict. So if I do an experiential, with my third chakra, what I'm doing right now is I'm just really bringing my attention back to my third chakra and me sitting here in the room I'm in. And so you feel how, okay, now I'm looking at you on the screen again, and I'm talking to you, but do you feel how my third chakra is no longer even really reaching out to you? It's just kind of staying withdrawn in me.
Yeah.
You're probably like, thank God, what a relief.
It's more like we were just kind of like vibing and like hanging out somewhere else. That was kind of fun and like felt pretty good. And now I have to like notice that in myself and like try to come down and meet you there.
Yeah, because there's separateness now, right?
Right.
In the third chakra. We were sharing a space.
Right.
And then, it's that thing of, were we sharing my space, right? My third chakra?
Right.
Or was it joint?
Right.
And then it's the question of, well, it's joint if we're being conscious. If we just kind of play this out. So now I'm going to do the opposite. Okay, so now my third chakra, I'm just kind of letting it expand out. I'm looking at you and talking to you, and in my mind, I'm sort of acting as if I'm allowing space for your third chakra right now. but can you feel energetically that really I'm not?
Yeah, I'm having to like push back a little bit.
Yeah. And so in my mind, I could be like, what are you talking about? I'm totally like, I'm willing to listen to what you have to say. You know, I'll even be silent and let you talk. But meanwhile, my third chakra's just got its middle finger up to you. And a lot of people are in this and don't know it.
Right.
And I spend my fair share of time in that state because it's just one of the defensive patterns that which of course, all my parents' fault.
If there's one thing we can impart in this podcast.
Yeah. But so you feel the difference how in my mind, I could literally be very willing to hear what you have to say, to have this very dyadic back and forth.
And like, I'm like, there's no way. Like, I don't need to say anything right now. Like, it's not going to be heard.
Right.
Because we're doing this intentionally. It's funny.
Right.
But like, if that was the dynamic and you and I were like talking, I would just be like, I am done here. Like, there's no need to be here. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You'd just be like, you're a dick. And I'd be like, well, obviously you are
because I'm here like giving you space to say what you want to say.
Exactly. I'm totally willing to talk about this. I see this in working with couples, you know, a lot where and it's sad because like the person that's in the role that I'm doing right now is very in pain and very much wants to relate and is trying to hear the other person and whatever. And then the other person is just kind of at a loss because it doesn't feel good to them, but they don't really know how to even explain what it is that's happening, let alone get the other person to change it.
Well, and I'm sure in that state too, like in a relationship, the person said some of the right things.
Yeah.
Because conceptually, you know what the model should be, right?
Right.
They're having two separate conversations.
Right.
The third chakra and the mind, and like what the mind can express as true versus what the third chakra is defending against probably aren't even in the same world, you know, but because of the way they have to interrelate, they're like, that's the dynamic.
Yeah.
But it takes some shift in what that third chakra understanding of what the issue is. But it's not going to be the same conceptual issue.
Right.
Just the core wounding stuff we were talking about the other day, I feel like is related to that.
Yeah, definitely. This dynamic of the mind doing this one thing and the body doing another thing, and then body actually, in an attempt to relate, actually dominating or abusing or something, right? That dynamic is very much there in the story of Mice and Men, where, what is it, George and Lenny? Mm-hmm. George is the mind.
Yeah.
Lenny's the body. Lenny has this desire to connect with the mouse, but it doesn't have enough mind awareness to gauge relationally with it, so it ends up like killing it. Like in these mythological stories, it's all one psyche, right? So George is the way he is because he's disconnected from body. So the mind isn't being checked by body. But Lenny is a body not being checked by mind. The relationship between mind and body, which I think is largely misunderstood. People say mind body, but instead of actually listening to body, people try to override body with their mind. Even someone that's doing yoga, they're there on their yoga mat, doing the posture, and then their mind is bearing down, trying to get their body to do the posture. And it's supposed to be the other way around. You're putting your body in a certain posture that then is supposed to make your mind change. Like it's the exact opposite. Mind is supposed to change and adapt and conform to what body's doing. And everyone today is doing the exact opposite. Their mind is holding firm and trying to get body to do this idea of a posture that the mind has.
I think it gets back to that whole zero chakra concept as far as the energy coming up from existential ground and being processed on the way up. And it feels like an attempt to like tamper that with control of the mind,
right.
Or like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the rider just cranking those reins to where the horse is just like on its knees.
Anxious constantly.
Right. As far as the experiential, I've gone back to just my normal amount of oppressively blasting my third chakra at you.
You don't feel too oppressive today, just so you know.
Okay, good. Just as far as example, if I do that if I do that third chakra narcissistic stance, but have my mind in sync with it also, right? So first, if I do it, if I just sort of ramp up my third chakra again, but not my mind. All right. So you feel how I'm back towards that thing where I'm looking at you, I'm saying I'm willing to hear what you have to say, but my third chakra is not allowing it. Do you feel that again?
Yeah.
Okay. And so now if I stay with this, but now if I hook my mind into it to where I'm not aware outside of it and not if I just make my mind get in sync with that, okay, then it's going to look more like this. And you feel how now I can sit here, I can say the same words, I can say, okay, I'm willing to listen to you, but now I'm not allowing any inflow of energy into my intellect. It's all outflow. And I'm looking at you and I'm like, yeah, go ahead, Jeff, say what you want to say. I'm here for you, Jeff. I'm here to listen.
Yeah. It was like you went from being a teenager to, just very hostile.
Right.
Because before, when it was just your third chakra, I felt like I needed to like parent you, or like just like a little sternness, and then this is going to be okay. You know, like it's not a big deal, but like, I know you're giving me the finger with your third chakra, but like, you know, come on.
Right.
It's not. But then you shift to the other thing, and it's like, I feel like I have to give you more space because it feels very like defensive.
Yeah. Not that what I'm going to say is right and what you said is wrong, but just the way that I tend to categorize it. That first mode where there was just some parenting needed because it was just body, I tend to think of as pre-adolescent.
Okay.
But then when there's a shift into adolescence, the mind kicks in, and now, no, the adolescent really thinks they know.
Yeah.
That the parent's an idiot. And
I think it's tough because you're an adult, so I think you do it more intensely than a kid does.
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can really do it. Like the kid's just trying it out, you know?
Yeah.
But I hear the distinction you're making.
And it's an important distinction because the shift from body to mind as far as identity, right? Because if I shift back down into third and I take my mind identity out of it, okay, so now my mind isn't as in it, but my chakra still is. And whether I'm doing an aggressive thing or maybe I'm doing a pleading thing, right? Where right now I'm like, you know, but why can't I go to the thing? Like, you know, everyone's going to be there. Or this. And you feel how my mind is still like not, there's no power in my mind. My mind's just kind of like confused or pleading.
Right.
And because it's what my third chakra wants. And I'm telling you, but my third chakra sees it this way. But it's like I'm allowing the ego to be yours. My third chakra is saying, it's trying to relate to your mind.
Right.
Because I'm still letting you be parent, for example, right?
Right.
If I'm a pre-adolescent.
Because there's a lot more like compassion for that.
Yes, right.
To see that this is something you want to do, and like the main thing you're reacting to is the fact that you don't get to do it. It's not even like you're that upset about the specific thing. You just don't like this feeling that you don't get to do the thing you wanted.
Right. And I'm letting you have the authority.
Yeah.
We're supposed to do it as adults. You know, if you're talking to your boss, you need to acquiesce in the mind and let the boss be the authority. So right now, if you're my boss, just notice if I shift, do you feel how, okay.
This is triggering for me, but we can keep going.
So you feel how right now, if I engage you like this, you feel how suddenly you're the one in the power seat.
Yeah.
And it's like your ego mind is now the decision maker. I'm just giving input. And whether it's about something objective that has nothing to do with you or I, or whether I'm asking you, hey, could I take the day off tomorrow? The decision making, my mind is handing over to you. And again, we're supposed to be able to do this moment to moment, right? If I'm just saying, hey, will you give me directions to, like, I got to be able to turn it over to you. This is your stereotypical thing where the man doesn't want to like ask for directions or look at the map because like he doesn't want to come out of that like authority state. And Archie Bunker, part of that whole thing was he'd spend the first 99% of the episode just absolutely in that narcissistic mind state. And then usually at the end, he finally like sort of sees the truth in
what everyone else around him is saying.
Right.
The world revolving around his chair.
Yes, exactly. But developmentally, it's super important. It's like in that Archie Bunker thing, it's like those different lines of development with Wilbur's stuff, right? It's like Edith, for example, developmentally isn't going up and being an ego. She's still down in body. And she's still just trying to like make the environment all good and have everyone get along. And she doesn't really care what truth is. She does, you know what I mean? She's not really caring about politics. She's orienting to the immediate environment and just trying to have Archie not be mad and trying to have Gloria not be sad and just trying to like, you know, get the dinner made or whatever. And so there's a way that Archie's like developmentally above her, but he's frustrated as hell and angry because he feels alone as he's trying to talk politics or explain his view and whether his view's accurate or not has nothing to do with it. It's that he's trying to wrestle with certain concepts, and Edith is not meeting him there in any way. So he feels alone, and so he's always tantruming because there's no holding, there's no container. And so then he looks like the asshole.
I mean, he is kind of an asshole.
Well, it's like he is.
But you're just explaining why. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, and then they do that thing that always was kind of powerful where it seems like at least once an episode, Edith would sort of pop up into her ego mind and sort of say something that makes you go, wait a second, she knows what's going on all the while here.
Right. She's just putting something else above that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a really common dynamic. And it used to be the dynamic, you know, it's the stereotypical 50s household dynamic.
But then to your point, like this is really an expression of one psyche. Like this is.
Yes, right. And it's a developmental thing where you have more and more, back to the thing about personality and all that, right? When you step up into ego, out of body, that's the movement into adolescence. That's the movement that we do several of those. The Oedipal shift from pre-Oedipal to Oedipal is from body to mind. The shift from pre-adolescence to adolescence. It's like the Oedipal thing is from second chakra, emotional, sexual, from body up into mind. You have awareness of emotional, sexual instead of just from it.
Right.
When it's just from it, you cannot allow a third, which is the genius of Freud's insights around the Oedipal thing. Everyone just thinks it's about wanting to have sex with your mom or something. It's that
there is no, that dynamic isn't the same.
Yeah, right. The dynamic, your need, if you're just coming from body, as far as second chakra, the need is a dyad. And you'll see it with couples, right? Romantic couples, part of what feels so good and exciting and about being in a romantic dyad, there's this body-to-body bubble that the two people can be in. And it's a part of what feels wonderful is the symbiotic nature of it, the coziness of it, the union, right? That oh my God, the separateness I was feeling emotionally and sexually, now I'm in a relational dynamic where I feel whole again, or I don't feel separate. If you have a third enter into that, even as adults, if you have two people that are dating, but then there's a third wheel that's there with them, it's like, well, now can the two people that were in the dyad allow the third, or are they going to just section off and do the dyad and leave the third out in the cold?
How can they? Yeah, what does that relating look like?
So ideally, if they're doing the mature thing, it would be that they come out of the dyad and they stay in a triad, which means they come up into mind instead of body. They allow separateness. They forego the dyadic experience.
Yeah, which accentuates their own separateness.
Yeah, right. And if they can't handle that, then they're going to do it, and then the third wheel is going to go, all right, I think I'm going to not like hang out with you guys right now.
Find some other people to hang out,
Yeah. What Freud was looking at was mother and father are in that kind of dyadic, symbiotic, relational thing, body to body, and then they have a kid, and now mother's in that with the kid. Right? And it's tough because now father is suddenly often pushed out.
If you haven't had any time third wheeling with someone, it can be a really strange foreign experience.
Yeah.
And that's just on like a low stakes thing, much less like...
Right.
Yeah.
It creates tension between mother and father because mother's doing this thing with the baby.
That she is part of it. Like that's just what it is, right?
Yeah. And there's all kinds of ramifications of that. One thing that it seems real obvious to me that there's a big aspect of postpartum depression that has to do with these relational dynamics I'm talking about. What is a really common thing, mom just stays in the dyad with child. Father just starts to accept that he's the third wheel. And that becomes the family system.
Wow.
That's the constellation going forward. And what happens? Well, it makes for a narcissistic child who wins the Oedipal conflict.
Wow.
Right? Because what's supposed to happen is when the child gets to a certain age, and this is pretty young, father does not just go away, and child starts to feel separate from mother and starts to freak out, right? And at a certain level of development, starts to recognize, wait a second, there's a third in this dyad, and that third is father. And that's terribly distressing for the child. And the child attempts to win that Oedipal conflict. I'm more important than father. I have your full attention. Father doesn't have your full attention. And in modern day society, as I keep saying, we have this ridiculously child-centered parenting practice where the child's needs come before the parent's needs. And so the mother thinks she's doing a good thing by having the child come before father. And of course, I'm not saying you leave the baby, to starve to death.
It's tough. Yeah. I hear the nuance. Like,
okay.
You've raised a child. Like, I'm not worried that you don't understand what the importance of caring for.
Right.
We're talking about structural issues.
Thank you for giving me that credit. It makes for a narcissistic child who won the Oedipal conflict, which makes them have emotional, sexual immaturity as an adult. And the marriage, when the child gets to be an adult and leaves home, the parents look at each other and are like, who are you? Because they haven't been in any kind of dyadic thing for 18 years. So they get divorced. And that scenario right there, I think is quite common. And of course, you throw siblings in there and you throw, there's all kinds of super complicated. But yeah, those general structural issues.
Right, because they could all have different relationships with the parents.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like the parents had the same approach with all the kids, or
right.
They may have been through some of those dyad, triad things along the way, but one of the kids may have experienced one more than the other. And
so then you can feel this stuff.
When you were like talking about parts of it, I was like, leave me alone, Lance. Like, why?
Why do we have to rehash your family history? And, as an adult, like you were saying a minute ago, like if you have a third wheel experience, especially if the other two are doing kind of a dyadic thing and leaving you out in the cold, it can be really powerful. And it's like, it's strange because you're like, I don't want in their freaking dyad.
Right.
Like, I'm not like jealous. I don't even want to be with like that person.
Yeah.
You're not like, it's not that thing of like, even if you have no interest in being romantically, sexually involved with either of the other two people,
right? Just
that experience of being the third wheel, it brings up one's own Oedipal conflicts, meaning the conflict about wanting it to stay pre-Oedipal, which means wanting the dyad, wanting exclusive attention. This whole idea that in our psyche, to be able to tolerate not having that, it is a hallmark of psychological development. And then to make it a little even more convoluted, when you have this dyad that I'm talking about, the desire in that dyad that I'm talking about is that if you get the other person's exclusive attention, then what you do is you shift from a dyad into a monad. Like, that's the desire, right? Is to become one. And so you go into this oneness state that's so blissful and great. But it ceases to be two, right? We're always trying to get back to one. And so this idea of a third, what the intrusion of a third ultimately leads to is the ability to do an actual dyad with someone.
What I was thinking about when you're talking about it was like that desire to get back was the word monad is so base level, like, I mean, foundational. And then the heartbreaking truth of it is that it will never be the case.
Right.
The only monad you have is yourself.
Yeah.
And like that is a hard truth to face, because like the ego will constantly look for new ways to incorporate something, some other thing into the monad. So what you're saying is that if you have a third there, you can finally realize a part of the truth of a dyad.
Yes. Right.
Because our instinct and our desire brings us back to wanting to be a monad.
Yes.
And that you can have any of these like state experiences or like relational experiences. The truth of them is that they're a dyad, and you try to incorporate it into the monad, and it's like, no, that's not really what's going on. Like there's two things there. Man, there's a sadness there.
And see that, are you just queuing me up for the next theoretical?
And I'm just feeling it. Go ahead.
Well, Melanie Klein's thing about the psychological birth of the infant,
okay,
is that the move from the paranoid schizoid position to the depressive position. And the paranoid schizoid is that you're still in the absolute attempt to get the fucking monad to happen. To actually accept what you were just accepting, she says, requires the ability to grieve. And that grief is profound. It's not just, it's a bummer that, I don't get to be in a symbiotic bubble with someone.
It's a grief outside of time.
Yeah, it's the absolute loss of mother, loss of nature, loss of... It's this profound splitting of the one into two that we're either just obsessed with trying to have that not be so, or we have to go through this terrible grief. Why she's calling it this birth. It's the symbiotic union that was there when the child was in the womb. There's the physical birth and there's the separating. Right now, suddenly the child is outside of that. And then that idea that there's birth after birth after birth that's supposed to happen, but there's a tremendous loss each time.
Yeah.
She was making the point that if you're going to actually accept that loss, you're going to have to grieve deeply.
Well, it's perpetual on some level, or it can feel that way, that the grieving, like you're saying, is a continual, because you will it's just, you keep getting these things where you feel like it's one, and it's like, no, it's two.
Yep, exactly.
And like, it's one, no, it's two. I think this is a truth I've only recently started to accept myself. I think that like, I'm feeling it pretty profoundly right now. When you said it, it just made a lot of sense. Triad, dyad, monad dynamic. Because it's such an unconscious clinging or an unconscious drive to incorporate.
Right. So you're saying I was successful in helping you see that it's absolutely hopeless to try to get back to the oneness?
Well, it's hopeless to look for the oneness outside of yourself or achieve oneness by clinging to something or trying to make something into yourself. Right. That's the hopeless thing.
Yes. I was joking and looking at it from underneath it. You just gave the view from above it.
Yeah, take that.
But yeah, even from above it, it still hurts.
Oh, yeah. No, the pain is like that's why it's grieving, like you said. Like the pain is just there.
Yeah. The idea is that the grief doesn't go away, right? You just accept it.
Yeah, you just feel it, and it makes... I mean, you want to talk about like taking off yellow tinted glasses or rose tinted glasses. Like that's what the grief does.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about the Dimension Approach, please visit dimensionapproach.com.